the folkloric nature of the goblin is so amorphous as to be impossible to pin down. This is because people began to use it in a fairly general way to mean many different possible fairy creatures. Goblins is a general term for evil and malicious spirits, usually small and grotesque in appearance. The sting is taken from the name by prefixing it with hob, for the hobgoblins were generally thought of as helpful, but despite the frustrating way which the English language often mixes words around, there does seem to be a group of beings from which many of the ideas of goblins spring. These are the fairies of the household, which have been driven from their home or were so angry and saddened by some loss that their very nature changed, and or wild fairies that people tried and failed to domesticate. Etymologically, the word has two possible origins. One is used to describe traders and demonic spirits. The second was used to describe household spirits, protectors of rooms. In this, one of the goblin's folkloric ancestors, the kobold, is well known for its wild laughter. William Sayre's article on the origin of the word goblin states that an Old English protector of rooms can have been both evicted from the home to the wilderness and burdened with a derogatory foreign name. There the goblin survived, but surely with an irreversible darkening of the mood. House fairies generally had a temper. In Wales, one fairy became a friend with a man who died in battle. In mourning, he turned from a kind and helpful fairy into a bogey. He broke things, teased animals, and attacked people, till he was finally captured by a wise man and banished. Another house fairy, upon being spied upon in Germany, cut the spying person apart, cooked and devoured them. In Scandinavia, a house fairy killed a cow because they thought they hadn't been given butter with their oatmeal, while another house fairy tried to smother a man because he didn't like the look of him. Most house fairies were kind, of course, but it does seem that they could, at certain points, transform into dangerous beings. I tend to view this transformation as being similar to that of werewolves, although even kindly fairies could be thievish at times and would often steal from the neighbors. So it shouldn't be surprising that goblins would also frequently steal. Consider the goblin-like being from northern England known as the Dunning, who would rob people and had a lot of loot hidden away until he was finally caught, although the location of his treasure was never disclosed. Most of the stories of him are about him playing pranks. He often took the form of a horse so that he could drop those who were riding him into a stream with a loud whicker. It's important to keep in mind that while goblins were likely former domestic fairies, many of these domestic fairies had once been wild. Robin Goodfellow, or Puck, who dwells within the woods, also dwelt in the home and helped with cleaning. Some pixies were at once a fairy of the moorlands and of the farms, who helped with threshing and rewarded those who kept their homes clean. A man in Germany got a wild fairy to live with him by bringing a log with a hole in it into his home and promising it food. In any case, what this means is that goblins were likely fairies that had once taken comfort in dwelling with a human, likely receiving regular food from the human, praise, and perhaps even had positive conversations with them. Yet for whatever reason, the fairy lost this. As a result, we shouldn't only focus on the negative side of goblins, for while their name outside of hobgoblins came to be used for dangerous and wicked creatures, and they often were, there does seem to be more to this story. Consider, for example, the idea that it seems that there were two Lokis. One was a domestic spirit by the fireplace, helping farmers with farm work and attracting wealth to the farm. The other, the mythical character, was very different, but still derived from this. There's an engaging article explaining the connection between Loki and the Norse house fairy, and the trickster character folklore known as the Ashlad. These Ashlads, like mini-fairies, would upset the order of things, aiding the peasants against the wealthy and kings. This would explain why the mythology we have, which was told and pinned down by the wealthy, disliked figures like Loki. After all, robbing from the rich, as Robin Hood did, or overthrowing the judge, as Loki did, might be all well and good for the peasantry, but it is an evil act in the mind of the nobility. Some goblins, like the Ashlads of folklore, might very well have sought to overturn the established order, as many fairies did punish the wicked and miserly and unjust. This moves a bit into speculation, but we know that various fairy figures were evoked in peasant rebellions during the medieval era, and it would make sense for some domestic tricksters, such as Puck or Robin Goodfellow, to have stepped into this role as well. Obviously, None of this is what people thought of goblins in the 19th century when the stories were collected and fantasy stories began using them. At this point, goblins had simply become a general term for evil and typically mischievous creatures. Still, to a certain extent, we can see elements of these ideas in goblins. The creature that caused mischief, seeks for wealth, and upends the natural order, that exists both in the wilderness and domestic spaces, but is no longer truly at home in either.